Steve Wilson from Grand Junction, Colorado. Sometimes we wonder how we got to where we are. And in my case, looking at the photo behind me was me about 25 years ago. And it was my value system that not only got me there, but it got me out of there. First of all, I was raised on a farm where we had chores, cows to milk, chickens to feed, and all of the things that went along with that. In other words, responsibility. Then somewhere in my junior year, we moved into the city, and that was a whole different lifestyle. No chores, schooling, and then just play. And somewhere in there, I began to lose the values that my father and mother had blessed me with, which was responsibility, a work ethic, and obviously an honesty issue. And that's far from what went on. And I found myself moving into areas that I wasn't comfortable with. But to go along, I went along. And that moved through my college career and into the service, and then continued on for a number of years until I reached the ripe old age of about 50. That's some 25 years ago. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and I honestly didn't like what I saw. And I wondered, geez, how did this 25 years slip by me so rapidly in pursuing a lifestyle, in pursuing family life, and all of the things that goes with making a living and living life, if you will. But that was quite a traumatic time for me to look at how I had aged, how I had put on a little bit extra weight, had some joints that didn't function correctly, and coming out of a kind of an athletic background, that wasn't the way I wanted to go and deal with the next 25 years or 30 or whatever I was going to have. A little bit of high blood pressure, all of the things that the aging process brings along. And I'd heard that story, I just didn't like it. And so I found myself back in the scriptures that allowed me to look at some things from a different viewpoint. And starting in Psalms 119, verse about 56, it basically says, I looked at myself, I didn't like it, and I didn't. And in my case, I took a little while to turn and run toward the principles and the instructions that I was raised under, from a dietary to an economic to a physical side and to a spiritual side, and I moved back to the principles that I lived from. And that was most interesting because within just a short period of time, I began to see some incredible results. You see, you just can't put stuff in your body and look at stuff and list this stuff that's detrimental to you and expect your life to get better. So there was some changes. And at that time, I was raised under a concept of there are two roads that you can choose, either one of discipline or one where there is no discipline. And then you got to throw this thing called knowledge, because that has been changing around substantially. And it's that time that I really began to look at fundamentally the Hebrew language and what it meant and what the teachings of my Yeshua meant to me. And I raced toward that information. And in doing so, the things that have gone on with my body physically are really, really incredible. Along with that, the emotional side, the spiritual side, the financial side, you see, it's very, very inexpensive from a cost price to live and eat according to the way our bodies are designed. On the other side, if you choose to eat poorly, the costs mount up very rapidly in terms of lack of performance, hospital issues, insurance issues, all of those things come into play, and they penalize us for not taking care of their body. So I took that road, and I found that most people looked at me and said, gosh, you're in your mid-70s, and here you are running in the mountains, and you're physically fit, your blood pressure is way down, your resting heart rate is way down. And I look at our kids and what this principle is all about is how can we stand in the gap and talk to our kids about them not going through what we did to get here. And I'm speaking, I'm sure, to those folks that have walked the same path that I did. Maybe less, maybe more. My friends now, many of them are addicted to prescription drugs. Many of them are street drugs, alcohol issue. And that's just to get started. Along with that, the fatigue, the stress, the inability to have cognitive thinking, the diabetes, the obesity. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And that tells me that something that I read and was obedient to allowed me to live a lifestyle that is really changed. And that's the message that we want to take to our children. We want them and our grandchildren to bypass some of this horror story that's going on, that I'm viewing on the streets with kids that their language is so horrible, but it's only because maybe our language was horrible. Their diets are terrible. Some of these kids, teenagers, in fact, it's about 50% of the boys that are teenagers, they have a huge problem with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and the obesity that runs rampant in the teenagers. We want to give them at least an opportunity to say that, yes, we went through that age bracket, and yes, we had some problems, but the problems that they're dealing with today are significantly different than the ones that we did. And we need for them not to be thrown into that jungle out there with little to no knowledge on how to live. And that's where a group of us are going to talk about our stories, what we did with the challenges of life, how we began to move backward to the principles that perhaps some of us didn't know because it's never been taught. And we want to teach that. We want to take you into a realm of comfort, a realm of performance, a realm to where you are pleased with yourself. And it's that kind of thing that I believe we have to offer. And you can take that old body that's you're looking at behind and maybe transform it. There is that incredible ability to change, not only internally, but externally, to look young, to feel young, to actually act young. And I don't mean, goofy, but I mean do things with the grandkids that they never thought they would see. And it's with that I encourage you to walk with us and encourage you to get involved with us in the things that we're doing. Thank you so very, very much.